She said it like she was giving me a compliment. We were sitting on the back porch, the kind of evening Long Beach does well, salt air coming off the water, the noise of Belmont Shore faint in the distance. She had her legs pulled up on the chair, glass of wine in hand, and she looked at me the way someone looks at a piece of furniture they're fond of, but wouldn't miss if it disappeared. You know what I love about you, Tristan? She tilted her head slightly. You're stable. Like, genuinely stable. You're the kind of guy a woman comes back to. I set my beer down on the table. A bottle of Modelo, still cold. Say that again. She smiled, not catching anything in my tone. I'm serious. You're not going anywhere. You've got your career, your place, your whole thing figured out. Other guys are a mess. You're not. So what you're telling me, I said, is that you see me as a place to land after you're done doing whatever it is you want to do out there. She laughed a little. I didn't say it like that. You didn't have to. That was the moment. Not a dramatic one. No raised voices. Just a sentence that landed with the weight of everything she'd been showing me for months. The late nights, she'd come home smelling like someone else's cologne and blame it on a pack bar. The way she'd go quiet for days and then act like nothing happened. The comments about how I was too focused and too serious and didn't know how to just live. She wasn't wrong that I was focused. I was 27, working remotely as a software engineer, specializing in medical systems, and I'd been building something real since I was barely 20. The condo in the gated community off 2nd Street wasn't luck. I bought it at 24, drove a 2009 Tacoma with 140,000 miles on it, and put every extra dollar into something that would still be standing in 10 years. Neither was the stability she seemed to think made me convenient. That was the part that stayed with me. Not that she wanted freedom. Plenty of people do. What got me was that she assumed I'd absorb it. That I was the type of man who'd sit quietly on this porch while she went out and lived however she wanted, and I'd still be here when she decided she'd had enough of it. Savannah. I said her name once flat. If you walk out that door chasing whatever version of freedom you think is out there, you don't come back. That's not a threat. That's just how it works. She looked at me like I'd said something absurd. Tristan, relax. I'm not going anywhere tonight. I'm literally sitting right here. Tonight isn't the problem. She put her glass down and crossed her arms, and I watched her shift into the version of herself she used when she wanted to redirect the conversation. Why do you always do this? I give you a compliment, and you turn it into some big thing. You told me I'm the guy you come back to. I'm telling you that position isn't open. She stared at me for a moment, then let out a short laugh. You're serious? I've been serious for a while. You just weren't paying attention. She didn't say much after that. She went inside, and I stayed on the porch until the noise from the shore was the only thing left to listen to. I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting for her to come back out and say something that would change the shape of things. I already knew what I was going to do by the time I finished that beer. The next morning, while she was still asleep, I opened my laptop and started making calls. The calls I made that morning weren't dramatic. I updated the gate access codes through the HOA portal, called the management office to add a name restriction to the guest list, and moved her things into 2 boxes I left by the front door before she woke up. When she came out of the bedroom and saw the boxes, she stopped in the middle of the hallway. What is this? Your stuff from the bathroom and the closet. I left the things on the shelf I wasn't sure about. You can tell me what you want to do with those. She stared at the boxes, then at me. You're not serious, Savannah. We covered this last night. We had a conversation on the porch. That's not. You can't just box my things up while I'm sleeping. I can't, I said. And I did. You told me you see me as the stable option. The one you come back to. I'm letting you know that option is closed. That's it. She switched tactics fast. The irritation dropped out of her face, and she came toward me with her arms out, voice softer. Tristan, you're blowing this way out of proportion. I love you. I wasn't saying I wanted to go anywhere. I was just. You were just being honest, I said. And I appreciate it. Don't take it back now. She pulled back. You have a place to go, I continued. Bailey said you could crash there if you ever needed to. I heard that conversation 3 weeks ago, so you're not without options. That landed differently. She hadn't expected me to remember that. Her jaw tightened, and she looked away, and for a moment, she seemed to be calculating something. Then she picked up one of the boxes without another word and walked out. She came back for the second, 120 minutes later. She didn't ring the bell. She still had a key. That changed by noon. I had the lock cylinder swapped out before lunch. I didn't watch her leave from the window. I had a project deadline, and I worked through it. By evening, I'd submitted the build, grabbed something from Taco Bell, picked up a few things from Kroger on Anaheim, and spent the night the same way I'd spent hundreds of nights before she moved in, without explanation, without anyone waiting to be entertained. Savannah, from what I heard through mutual contacts, was doing exactly what she described. Nights out in Belmont Shore, weekends at the beach, a rotating cast of people around her. A mutual friend, Felix Hood, mentioned her name once in passing, and I told him I didn't need updates. He nodded and moved on. I had blocked her on every platform the morning she left, not out of bitterness, but because there was no reason to leave a door cracked that I'd already decided to close. About 3 weeks later, a colleague named Joseph Carson mentioned his neighbor worked in architecture and wanted to connect with someone who understood building systems integration. He forwarded her contact that Friday. Her name was Ava Gardner. She messaged that same evening. Direct, professional, no filler. She had a question about a specific interoperability standard and wanted to know if I had 15 minutes to talk through it. We talked for an hour and 40 minutes. She was 26, worked as a junior architect at a firm in downtown Long Beach, and had a precision in conversation I hadn't encountered in a long time. She didn't perform. She didn't fill silence with noise. When she didn't know something, she said so and moved to the next question. We met for coffee at a place on Pine Avenue the following Wednesday. She showed up 3 minutes early. We talked for close to 3 hours. I drove home and sat in the driveway for a moment before going inside. Ava and I started meeting regularly after that Wednesday on Pine Avenue. No label, no conversation about what it was. We just kept showing up. She'd come by on weekends. I'd pick her up after a Friday site visits downtown. No testing, no performance. She was present, and so was I. About 6 weeks after Savannah left, Felix had texted me. He'd been at a birthday gathering in Belmont Shore the night before and ran into her. He wasn't trying to stir anything up. Felix wasn't built that way. But he said she looked rough, and he thought I should know in case she reached out. I thanked him and put my phone down. She never reached out. Not because she didn't try, I found that out later, but because every number she had for me was gone. The personal cell, the number she had saved under my name from 2 years back. All of it, removed from her access the morning she walked out with those boxes. What I pieced together from Felix and from a woman named Caitlin Pratt, loosely connected to both of us, was this. The first few weeks had been exactly what Savannah wanted. Nights out, new people, no one asking questions. She'd settled in a Bailey's place off Rondo Avenue and was treating it like a vacation. Then the first thing slipped. The restaurant on Atlantic, where she'd been working part-time for almost a year, let her go. Attendance issues. According to Caitlin, a few no-shows on weekend shifts, the kind of thing that adds up fast in food service. Savannah had always treated that job as background noise, money she didn't need to think about, and apparently she'd stopped thinking about it a little too completely. That alone wasn't a crisis. But what came next was Bailey, who'd offered the crash space without a defined timeline, starting to have a different kind of conversation around week 5. She wasn't covering groceries, wasn't splitting any of the utilities, and the apartment was increasingly becoming the after-party venue for whoever Savannah had brought along that night. Bailey gave her 2 weeks' notice. Savannah, from what Caitlin described, genuinely did not see it coming. By the time I was hearing any of this, Savannah was staying with a third person, a girl she knew from the beach crowd, and that arrangement was already showing its own cracks. No job, no stable place to land. And the social world that had seemed so full of possibility was turning out to be exactly what it always is when the novelty runs out. People with their own lives who weren't interested in carrying hers. Caitlin mentioned in passing that Savannah had come across a health matter during those weeks that required a clinic visit. I didn't ask for details. Meanwhile, Ava had started keeping a few things at the house. A jacket by the door. A mug on the second shelf. She'd met Carson and Felix by then. Felix pulled me aside one evening after the 3 of us grabbed food and said simply, "She's different." I told him I knew. One evening, Ava and I were sitting on the same back porch where Savannah had made her speech about stability. Same salt air, same distant noise from the shore. Ava was going over a set of building plans on her tablet, cross-referencing something with a code document. She didn't need me to entertain her. She wasn't waiting for anything. She was just there, doing her work in the same space as me. I watched her for a moment and thought about the woman who had sat in that same chair 6 weeks before and told me I was the kind of man she could come back to. Then I went back to my own screen and kept working. The conversation about Ava moving had happened on a Thursday evening. No build-up, no ceremony. She'd been driving back to her side of Long Beach 3 or 4 nights a week. And one night she mentioned that her lease was ending in 6 weeks and she hadn't decided whether to renew. I told her she didn't have to. She looked at me for a moment, then nodded once and said she'd think about it. She thought about it for 4 days. Then she said yes. She brought 2 carloads of things on Saturday. I cleared half the closet and the second bathroom. We didn't make it a production. No announcement, no celebration dinner. She put her things away, I made food, and that was the beginning of it. By the following weekend, it felt like she'd always been there, which was exactly the point. Ava had a precision about how she occupied space. Her architecture books went on the shelf by the window. Her drafting tools stayed in the second bedroom she used as a workspace. She had a system and kept to it, and somehow the house felt more organized than it had been before. Around that same time, I mentioned to her casually that I'd been thinking about a ring. I hadn't gone shopping yet, hadn't said anything to anyone else. She didn't make it dramatic. She said, "Okay, when you're ready." That was the whole conversation. It was enough. I told Felix the following week over lunch at a place on 2nd Street. He put his fork down and said, "Fast." I told him it had been 2 months. He said 2 months wasn't fast when you'd already figured out what you were looking for. Then he picked his fork back up and we talked about something else. I hadn't thought about Savannah in weeks. She existed somewhere in the city, probably still between temporary arrangements, still running the same version of herself that had convinced her freedom without consequences was a personality. But she wasn't in my line of sight, and I hadn't made any effort to change that. Caitlin Pratt changed that without meaning to. She ran into Savannah at a CVS on Atlantic about 10 days after Ava moved in, and Savannah asked about me directly. Caitlin kept it brief, said she didn't know what I was up to. Savannah pressed anyway. Was I still at the same address? Was I seeing someone? Caitlin gave her nothing. Savannah went quiet, then changed the subject. I read the text, replied with a thanks, and set the phone on the counter next to my Lenovo. That evening, Ava came home from a site visit with roll plans under one arm and a flat white from Pine Avenue in the other. She kicked off her shoes at the door, set everything down on her workspace table, and called from the back asking where I wanted to order dinner from. I said, "Olive Garden." She said, "Absolutely not. We settled on something else." That was the house now. That was what it had become in 2 months. Functional, direct, without theater. 3 days after Caitlin's text, I drove past the CVS on Atlantic on my way back from a hardware run at Home Depot. I didn't think about it. I had 2 new deadbolts in the back of the Tacoma and a specific project in mind for the weekend. The ring I'd been considering was already on order through a small jeweler on Pine that Ava had walked past once and pointed out without realizing she was doing it. Whatever Savannah was deciding in that CVS parking lot was her business. The address she was looking for hadn't changed, but what was inside it had completely, and she had no way of knowing that yet. It was a Saturday afternoon when the gate intercom buzzed. I was at my desk running a system diagnostic. Ava was in the back room with her plans spread across the table. I checked the camera feed on my phone, standard habit, nothing I thought about consciously anymore. The woman at the gate wasn't someone I recognized at first glance. She was wearing sunglasses and standing slightly to the side of the camera. Then she shifted and I saw the jaw, the posture, the way she tilted her head when she was waiting for something. I set my phone face down on the desk and went back to the diagnostic. The intercom buzzed twice more. I didn't answer. After a few minutes, the feed showed her stepping back from the gate, looking up at the surrounding wall, then walking along the perimeter toward the eastern side, where an older oak tree grew close to the boundary. I watched her assess it for about 30 seconds before I closed the app. I wasn't surprised. I'd half expected something like this after Caitlin's text. What I hadn't mapped out was exactly when or how, but the mechanics of it were predictable enough. Savannah had always operated on the assumption that determination was the same thing as leverage. I gave it 15 minutes, then walked to the front door and opened it. She was standing on the porch, hair slightly disheveled from the climb, one knee of her jeans scuffed with bark. She made it over the wall, across the common green, and up the front path without the security guard who covered the main gate on weekends catching her. I had to give her that much. She looked at me, and her expression did something complicated, like she'd rehearsed a version of this moment, and the actual version wasn't matching the script. "You weren't going to answer," she said. "No," I said. She pushed her sunglasses up to the top of her head. "Tristan, I need to talk to you. I know I don't have a right to just show up here, but I've tried everything else, and you've made it completely impossible to—" "You haven't tried everything," I said. "You tried the numbers you had. Those don't work anymore. That was a decision, not an accident." She exhaled. "Okay, fine. Can we talk?" 5 minutes. I leaned against the door frame and didn't move aside. "You've got less than that before Marcus from security does his loop. He's thorough on Saturdays." She glanced back over her shoulder, then refocused. "I made mistakes. I know that. I've had 2 months to sit with everything, and I know that what I said to you that night on the porch was wrong. Not just the words, the whole way I was thinking about you, about us. I treated you like a safety net, and that wasn't fair. No, I agreed. It wasn't. So I'm here to say that, and to ask if there's any version of this where we talk properly. Not right now if you don't want. Whenever you're ready, I'll work around your schedule. I'll do whatever you need. She stopped herself and tried a different angle. I miss you. I know I don't have a right to say that either, but it's the truth. I looked at her for a moment, not with hostility, just with the kind of clarity that 2 months of distance tends to produce. She looked tired. The brightness she usually carried had a worn quality to it, like a light running on backup power. Savannah. My voice stayed level. You didn't miss me. You ran out of options, and you came back to the one place you assumed was still open. Those aren't the same thing, and you're smart enough to know the difference. Her jaw tightened. That's not what this is. You just told me yourself. You treated me like a safety net. So what exactly are you here for if not to land in it? She didn't have an answer for that. Her mouth opened once, then closed, and she looked away toward the front garden, at the gravel path, the potted plants Ava had added along the entry, the small architectural details she wouldn't have recognized from 2 months ago because they hadn't been there. That's when she noticed the second set of keys on the hook inside the door, and the woman's jacket on the coat stand behind me. Her eyes moved back to mine slowly. Is someone living here? I didn't answer the question. I didn't need to. The answer was standing in the hallway behind me, having heard the door and come to see what was happening. Ava stopped a few steps back, plan still in hand, reading the situation in about 2 seconds the way people do when they're paying attention. She didn't make a scene of it. She just stood there, calm, unhurried, entirely at home, and that was more than enough. Savannah looked at her. Then she looked at me, then back at Ava. Something moved across her face that went beyond surprise. It was the particular expression of someone who has just understood, all at once, the full distance between where they thought they were standing and where they actually are. How long? Savannah said quietly. It wasn't really a question. Long enough, I said. She stood there for another few seconds, not moving. The scuff on her knee, the sunglasses pushed up on her head, and the 2 months of choices she'd made all arriving in the same place at the same time. Then the sound of boots on the gravel path came from the side of the house. The security guard who came around the corner was named Victor Stone, mid-50s, built like someone who'd done physical work most of his life and hadn't stopped. He covered weekend shifts at the complex and knew every resident by name and by vehicle. He also knew, because I'd updated the guest restriction list 2 months ago, that the woman standing on my porch was not authorized to be inside the gate. He looked at her, then at me. Mr. Keller, everything all right? It will be, I said. Savannah turned to face him and shifted into the version of herself she used when she needed something from stranger. Measured, a little disarming, the kind of tone designed to make a person feel like they were solving a problem together. I'm sorry. I know this looks off. I used to live here. I just needed to speak with him for a few minutes. I wasn't trying to. Ma'am. Victor's voice was flat and not unkind. You came over the east wall. A beat of silence. You're not on the access list, he continued. That means you're not supposed to be past the gate and definitely not on his property. I'm going to need you to come with me. She looked at me one more time. This was the last play, the look that said she was waiting for me to intervene, to soften the landing, to do what she'd always assumed I would do. The stable one, the one she could come back to. I held the door handle and said nothing. Tristan. Her voice dropped. You're really going to let him? You climbed a wall to get here, Savannah. Victor's just walking you back to the other side of it. She stared at me for a long moment. Whatever she was looking for in my face, she didn't find it. Victor stepped forward and she didn't resist. She went with him down the gravel path without another word, her shoulders set in a way that was trying to look composed and wasn't quite getting there. I watched them reach the bend in the path. Then I stepped back inside and closed the door. Ava was in the kitchen. She'd put the plans down and was filling a glass of water from the tap. She didn't ask me what that was about. She didn't need to. She'd been standing in the hallway long enough to understand the shape of it. She handed me the glass and went back to the counter to start on dinner. I sat down at the kitchen table and drank the water and looked at the room around me. The architecture books on a shelf, the draft pencils in the ceramic cup by the window, the second set of keys on the hook by the door, the house that 2 months ago had been mine alone and now belonged to something that actually made sense. You good? Ava asked from across the kitchen, not turning around. Yeah, I said. I'm good. She nodded and kept moving. That was a Saturday. The following Friday, I picked up the ring from the jeweler on Pine Avenue. It was a clean, simple band. No excess, no performance, which was exactly right for her. I brought it home in my jacket pocket and said nothing about it that night. We had dinner. She told me about a project setback at work. I told her about a system build that had finally cleared a week-long blockage. Normal things in a normal house on a normal evening. The next morning, Saturday, she was at the kitchen table with her coffee and a floor plan spread open in front of her. When I came downstairs, she looked up. I sat across from her and set the box on the table between us without a preamble. She looked at it, then at me. Ava Gardner, I said. I'm not doing a speech. You know what this is, and you know why. The only question is whether you want it. She was quiet for a moment, not hesitating, just taking it in. Then she opened the box, looked at the ring for a few seconds, and said, yes. Obviously, she put it on herself, which was exactly the kind of thing she would do. Then she went back to the floor plan and told me to make coffee, because hers had gone cold while I was being sentimental. I told her that was the least sentimental proposal in recorded history. She said she knew and that she'd loved it. Felix Hood found out 2 days later when he came by to return a tool he'd borrowed. He saw the ring on her hand, looked at me, and said, finally. I told him it had been 3 months. He said it felt longer. Ava told him he was welcome to leave anytime. We had dinner that night, the 3 of us plus Carson and his wife Natalie, at a place on 2nd Street that Ava had been wanting to try for a while. No announcement, no toasts, no production. Just food and a table of people who'd earned their seat at it. Carson made a quiet joke. Natalie asked to see the ring. Felix ordered too much and didn't apologize for it. By the time we left, the street outside was lit up the way Long Beach gets on clear November nights. The marina lights catching the water, the air just cool enough to notice. I drove home with Ava in the passenger seat, going through photos from the evening on her phone, narrating each one with a running commentary I only half followed. I pulled into the driveway, cut the engine, and for a moment we just sat there in the quiet. Good night, she said, not as a farewell, just as a statement of fact. Good night, I agreed. We went inside. I locked the door behind us, and that was the end of it. Not dramatically, not with a final word directed at anyone who wasn't in the room. Just a door closing on the version of things that no longer applied, and a house full of the version that did. The woman who told me I was the stable one, the kind she could come back to, had been right about one thing. I was stable. I just wasn't her floor anymore. I was somebody else's foundation, and that made all the difference. Well, he wants space to explore, and right now he has all the space in the world to explore new jobs, to find out where he will live, to maybe find someone who will love him again someday. That's what he wants, right? He says he is too perfect for her, too stable, too predictable. And now, ironically, the one thing he wants most is what he left behind. The truth is, when you treat life like it's easy, it ends up teaching you the hard way that it's not. And that's what's happening here. Luckily for our protagonist, he found someone who truly saw his worth, someone who respected him. But honestly, that's not even the most important part. The real victory was him out. Because imagine building a life with someone like that. Imagine the energy, the time, the peace that would be lost trying to put something broken together. He didn't lose anything. He woke up, and in the end, he just gave him exactly what he asked for. The only person who missteps here is him. Well, that's where our video ends. I really hope you have enjoyed your time here. Don't forget to leave your likes, your comments. Thank you very much for watching it, and see you in the next story. Take care.